welcome you to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. We're continuing our study in Job. We are in that section that has to do with his final defense, his closing argument, as it were. And that began in 27 and 28. We have a part of that defense is his defense of wisdom. And this passage is just absolutely beautiful. I've loved it since I was a boy. It's called, in some literature, it's called the Hymn to Wisdom. And there is a musicality in there. There's an artistry to it. It's really quite beautiful. The argument is pretty easy to see if you look at verse 12. But where can wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? That's his theme. That's what he wants to know. Where can we find wisdom? Where can we find understanding? It's the poetic parallelism is part of Hebrew poetry. And then that's in verse 12. If we look down to verse 20, he repeats it. From where then does wisdom come, and where is the place of understanding? And so an idea that's repeated means that's showing us the theme, certainly in the key. He wants to know where is that, and he's going to conclude the last verse of the hymn. Verse 28 of chapter 28 reads, it comes from Revelation. He's going to say, and to man God said, behold, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. That thought is repeated in Proverbs for wisdom. It's repeated in the New Testament. I think James repeats that. It becomes proverbial throughout the whole Bible. In any case, this is going to be a question about where can we find wisdom. That's what Job wants more than anything. He assumes that he will not be vindicated, but he knows no occasion of unrighteousness in him. And so he wants God to give him an answer, and that's not easily forthcoming. If he has wisdom, he thinks he will then have understanding to know his circumstances and to be able to understand it within his understanding of God. How can God permit such evil to happen to a good person, even if his goodness is relative? And he is secure in the idea that he will not say anything slanderous or amiss toward God. As he said to his wife, shall we accept good from the Lord and not evil? And he assumes that it's coming from God, and he will not curse God. He is restrained from doing that. I think that the same thing we see in the life of Christ, who suffers more than any man, but he says the essence is the same thing when he says, to Peter, I think it's to Peter, but to his disciples, when he tells them to put away the sword in the garden, shall I not drink the cup that the Father has given to me? And he knows it's an evil cup. So Job wants to understand, where can we find wisdom? And he looks at his fellow human beings, and he says, we search out diligently things that we esteem and value. And so he's going to talk about jewels, precious jewels. And in the first part, actually, throughout most of this, he'll talk about how we look for jewels and to what extraordinary, and gold and silver, and to what extraordinary lengths we go to find them. But do we put forth the same amount of extraordinary effort in seeking wisdom and understanding? And I think the answer is evident. But he now knows how valuable that is to understand how we fit into God's larger scheme, and how we know that God will bring about good, even through the evil that men intend. So looking at the psalm itself, it says, surely there is a mine for silver, and a place where gold is refined. So these two commodities that are identified as the most valuable, certainly in the ancient world they were. And it actually went back and forth over which was the more valuable, silver or gold. The Hebrew word for money is kesef. It means silver. So that was the primary means of commerce, would be weighted measures of silver. Gold certainly, but it was scarcer and harder to obtain in the Levant area, the Eastern Mediterranean. The source of gold was Sheba and Ophir, which was down in the Yemen area and in Ethiopia. So the pharaonic gold came from south of the Second Cataract of the Nile in what we would call Sudan, and Ethiopia was the source of jewels. So he says, surely there is a mine for silver in a place where gold is refined. So in order to create silver, which doesn't really occur so much in native state, it's generally found in ores, in veins of igneous rock, and a place where gold is refined, that is, it has to be purified in order to be commercially acceptable. He says that we know that there's a mine for silver in a place where gold is refined, and implicit in that is that men will extend extraordinary effort to find these commodities that are bearer instruments. They are gold themselves. They are money. They're not anything substituting for money. He says iron is taken from the dust, literally. It says earth in my translation, but iron is taken from the dust, and copper is smelted from the rock. They've translated it ore. That's not incorrect, because copper mixed in an ore, something like malachite is the ore rock of copper. It has to be smelted out. Copper does occur in native state, but it's rare too. Generally, the principle is you have to work with the dust to separate out the iron, and then with the rock to separate out the copper. But again, it looks, and these are valuable metals, primarily for war purposes, and so they're valued, obviously, by rulers and those in authority. But we have to go to efforts to create them in a state that's useful. So he's talking about gold and silver and bronze or copper mixed with tin becomes bronze, and iron. Man puts an end to darkness, he says. He's thinking about, he's contemplating on what extremes we go to open up these mines where we can derive these useful commodity metals. And he says, man puts an end to darkness. What does he mean? He's going to talk about how men will sink shafts into the earth and open up caves. And the cave is dark as night when you get into it very deeply. But men will figure out a way to bring light, whether it's by torches or some other means. So we'll put an end to darkness. You have to have light to see that glimmer of silver or gold in the ore. Man puts an end to darkness and searches every recess in his determination to find these metals. For ore or rock in the darkness and the shadow of death, it can't be seen. He breaks open a shaft away from people, way beyond the trodden place of man. If there is some word that comes of discovery in the early American history, a word came from Sutter's Mill in California that gold had been found, and that was when it was very low in its population, far away, and then from the Yukon in Alaska. And so people go wherever there is gold. They will go to those extraordinary links, but generally speaking, they're beyond the normal place where civilization has taken good root. So he says he breaks open a shaft away from people in places forgotten by feet, that no one goes there, but people will go to the extremes of the earth to find these precious metals. He said they hang far away from men, they swing to and fro. I think the idea there is very clearly they're sinking a shaft deep into the earth, and then they will carry out their mine wherever they find some glimmer of gold. So, I mean, we have these open pit mines. It's like you've uprooted all of the earth in order to find, and we dig deep tunnels into mountains in order to find these veins of ore. So they hang far away from men, they swing to and fro, and in the ancient world they'd have to be lowered down by ropes. As for the earth, from it comes bread, and underneath it it is turned up as if by fire. So we take our grains from the surface of the earth, but when we want these metals, we will go down into the earth and turn everything upside down. It's really quite remarkable imagery. Its stones are the source of sapphires, and it contains gold dust. That path no bird knows, nor has the falcon's eye seen it. It's such an extreme place. The falcon has, I think, the sharpest eyesight from the heights of where it is, and it's associated with the sun, so it's in the very heights of the terrestrial heaven. It can see something about an inch and a half in diameter on Earth. Its eyesight is far sharper than anything that we have as men. And so he says here, the path no bird knows, nor has the falcon's eye seen it. We can see that glimmer of gold. Somehow we wind up identifying a source of metal, and so we begin excavating the very bowels of the earth. The proud lions have not trodden it. The word is just one word, and it's associated with proud, and so oftentimes it's a wild beast, so that's often identified with a lion. That's not necessarily wrong here. The proud lions have not trodden it, nor has the fierce lion. It's also associated with fierceness, and so they're incorporating the adjectives that are implicit in the noun. It's one noun. It's a wild beast, nor has the fierce lion passed over it. There's nothing there. And these are typically tropical animals, and so you don't have that. Think of sub-Saharan Africa, all the rich mines in Central and Sub-Saharan Africa. It says the lion hasn't passed over it, and if he does, he's unmindful of the treasure that's beneath his foot. He puts his hand on the flint. Man does. That's a way of creating fire. And he overturns the mountains at the roots. And again, I think of open pit mining and a lot of scarring of the earth, all to overturn the earth so that we might find these metals. He cuts out channels in the rock. And then he dams up things. We'll see. His eye sees every precious thing. Man, even though our eyesight is not as keen as that of the falcon, we will see, we will find, we will not omit to see any glimmer of gold or silver or precious jewels. Those are the emblems in the Bible of everything that is valuable. So we think of the Holy City as a jewel city. In the medieval period, the cathedrals would develop this beautiful art form of stained glass in the different colors. The cathedral was always the highest building in Europe. By law, there could be no rival to its height in the spires. And they often included these beautiful stained glass windows, and that's to remind us of the precious jewels of the heavenly city that is described as being built of all of these 12 especially precious jewels. Revelation 21 describes them. So it's heavenly, and we will look everywhere for that which is precious, and it's an emblem of preciousness. And the question then comes, the logical conclusion of that is, if we value these things so highly, do we expend an equal amount of effort putting life and limb in jeopardy, swinging over shafts and doing everything we can, upheaving the whole earth? Do we put an equivalent amount of effort into finding that which is truly valuable, which is more valuable than silver or gold or rubies or sapphires or precious jewels? And the answer, I think he's going to tell us, is no, but we don't, but we should. So that's what's truly valuable. Man cuts out channels in the rocks, so there's a lot of panning for gold, and so then sleuths that are used to separate out the heavy gold from the silt, and so that's the idea of panning. The gold remains, it's heavier, so it will, and the water will wash away the silt on top of it, leaving a sprinkling of gold at the bottom of a pan. He dams up the streams from trickling, and what is hidden he brings forth to light. I think that damming up the stream is to provide the stream is carrying gold, and so he wants to intensify its stream and its force, and so all of that. It's amazing the technology that he's describing. This seems to be a very primitive, very ancient technology of mining and searching for these things, but it's really quite instructive from that. He speaks of iron. That's late. That's going to be 9th century, the Iron Age, when they moved from the Stone Age, the Paleo, Meso, and Neolithic age. Lithos is stone, to the Chalcolithic. We use stones, and Chalcos is copper. So that would be bronze, and then after that came the Iron Age. So we define our own development of technology by these metals that we're able to bring about. Bronze was used for a weapon of war until the Philistines in Israel, in the Levant, developed iron, and an iron sword can slice right through a bronze one, and so these metals also track the technology of war, which is kind of interesting. And the later the metal, oftentimes the more common, the more secular purposes it's intended for and destructive. So we'll see. Verse 12, but where can wisdom be found, and where is the place of understanding? He says, we have a mine for silver and a place where we can refine gold, but where can we find wisdom? It's a good question. Where can wisdom be found? And then the parallel, and where is the place of understanding? That's very characteristic of poetry, and everything in Job is poetry. He says, man does not know its value, Job says, nor is it found in the land of the living. Man does not know its value. I think we'd agree that that's true. And he says it's not found in the land of the living. I wonder what that means. Is it found among the dead? He says the deep says, that's the seas, the chaotic seas. The Greeks called okeanos, but it was the tehom to the Hebrews. That's what God creates in the beginning, the deep, the chaos seas. He says that the seas say it is not in me. The deep says it is not in me, and the sea says it is not with me. So you can see the parallel idea there. It's not to be found in the ocean. It cannot be purchased for gold, he says, nor can silver be weighed for its price. This repetition is indicative of that beautiful parallelism, so which is part of the art of the word. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir. The gold of Ophir in the Bible is the most precious. That's, I think, used in Psalm 45 of the jewelry of the bride of the son of David. She's arrayed in Ophir. Ophir is where the Queen of the South, Sheba, came to celebrate Solomon's wisdom. So she comes with all kinds of treasures, including gold, much gold. So she's one of the wise ones who was seeking wisdom and traveled a great distance. She's really, in a way, kind of an answer to this. She incorporates our understanding of what is truly valuable, and that is wisdom. And so she comes with gifts of gold, which she regards as of lesser significance. It cannot be valued in the gold of Ophir, in precious onyx or the sapphire. The onyx is the stone of Eden. And in Eden, interestingly, the gold was outside of the garden, not in it. In the ancient world, many of the myths have, like the Garden of the Hesperides to the west of Gibraltar. They thought that was the Garden of the Hesperides, and the trees bore golden fruit. We can think of King Midas. Everything he touched turned to gold. But in the Bible, gold is outside of the garden, which means that the chief value for man is his fellowship with God, to walk with him and accompany him in the garden in the cool of the day as he goes about accomplishing what God has commanded him to do. That's the true value. The true value is the fellowship, the intimate fellowship with God. Once he's outside of the garden, gold will take its place as being valuable, and the onyx and all of that. But in the garden, there is no need for that. There is no scarcity, for one thing. So there's no need for that kind of commercialism. So he says in verse 17, neither gold nor crystal can equal it. Crystal probably is glass, and glass was invented or discovered, actually, I guess it would be the word, by the Phoenicians, as they were a seafaring people, and they would camp along the coast, and in their campfires, the silicon sand would often melt and coalesce, and so they developed from that the idea of making glass, and very valuable. There are all kinds of, we've discovered all kinds of factories where the Romans made glass. There's one in Cologne by the cathedral, Römisch Germanisches Museum, where you can see all kinds of glassware, because there was sand and there was clay and all of that. So they made a glass factory there, and glass was very valuable in the ancient world because you could mold it. So when he says neither gold nor crystal can equal it, that could mean glass. And again, that would give us a date that probably is around the 9th century. That's when the Chalcolithic age becomes the age of iron. It's around the time of David when those transitions took place. He says, nor can it be exchanged for jewelry of fine gold. No mention shall be made of coral or crystal, for the price of wisdom is above rubies. I'm taking the same word and translating it crystal in one place and rubies in the other. I'm not sure that rubies is quite accurate. It seems like it's another word for crystal, but that seems repetitive, and in that case, perhaps they're relying upon the Septuagint to come to that conclusion, so I'm not going to contest that. It makes sense to me that he would speak of that beautiful blood red stone, the ruby. The topaz of Ethiopia, it's fiery amber, it's gorgeous, the topaz that comes from Ethiopia, or Cush in the Bible. And the topaz of Ethiopia cannot equal it, nor can it be valued with pure gold. So he's come to the conclusion again that wisdom is what we're looking for, and it's far more valuable than even the purest gold, the gold of Ophir, or all of these jewels lined up. The purest thing, the thing after which we should seek the most deliberately and intensively is wisdom. So verse 20, he repeats that statement. From where then does wisdom come? You can't mine it. You can't extract it from the earth. You can't chemically transform it like glass. There's no technology. Where do we get this thing that is really, or should be, the most valuable thing of all? From where does wisdom come, and where is the place of understanding? And he says, it is hidden from the eyes of all the living, and it is concealed from the birds of the air. My goodness. Even the birds of the air can't see it. The birds of the air, the word there in Hebrew is heavens. And there are 3 heavens. The closest to us, the realm of the birds, the fowl of the air, is the terrestrial heavens. And so he said, even though they're given enormous sight and able to see some kind of prey way down from the heights of the heaven where they're soaring, he says they can't see it. So how do we find it then? He says, destruction and death say, we have heard a report about it with our ears. I would imagine that's the case, because the lack of wisdom leads to destruction and death. He says, God understands its way. Now, he knows that. He knows that God, who sits above all, would know where wisdom can be found. He knows its place, and that's what we're looking for. Where is the place? We know there's a place where we can find silver. There's a place where we can We can refine gold, but where is the place where wisdom can be found? And he said, for God looks to the ends of the earth, and he sees under the whole heavens. He's omniscient, and he's omnipresent, and so he is aware of all things simultaneously. That means he will know where wisdom can be found. He can establish the weight for the wind. We would think that a wind has no weight, but it does actually. Air has weight. That's why we can have heavier than air flight, aerodynamically. So he's saying to establish a weight for the wind and apportion the waters by measure. This is what God can do and does. Somewhere I read many, many years ago, there's 66 million cubic miles of water in the oceans. It's unimaginable. A cubic mile, and then 66 million of them. And God's aware of all of that. He's aware of all the winds. Christ speaks of that as mystery known only to God. With wind, we don't know where it comes from or where it goes. We see it, we can observe it, but we don't understand it. So he's beginning to move into the idea that only God could know where we could find this. He knows everything. So he says, when he made a decree, a law, a very typical word for law, he made a statute. He made a law for the rain and a path for the thunderbolt. He established the laws of physics and of nature. And so these laws, he created them. So he is not only omniscient and omnipresent, he is the creator God. He made all of this. And then he saw wisdom and declared it and prepared it. Indeed, he searched it out, and he gave it to us by revelation. That's another way of knowing. When you think epistemologically, we can examine, and everything that has to do with technology is something that is tried and tested according to the laws of proof, and we can discover many things. But some things are beyond our discovery. They have to be revealed to us. And one of them is this, he said, he prepared it, indeed, he searched it out. And to man he said, so wisdom's source is going to be God himself in Revelation. And to man he said, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom, and to depart from evil is understanding. So here he's answering the questions in 12 and 20. Behold the fear of the Lord. And interestingly, he uses the covenant name of God. We have no context for understanding Job as Gentile or Jew. Most likely he is Gentile, but we don't know. And I think that's deliberate, by the way. But he uses the covenant name of God, and so he knows the Lord of Israel. He says, the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. The fear of the Lord is not phobic fear. It's the reverent worship of God. It's that fear that recognizes that God can give everything to him and take everything away, and yet he deserves all honor and respect. And it would be a fearsome thing, as Job has said, for him to curse God and die. That he will not do. Because God has said, behold the fear of the Lord, that is wisdom. And then the parallel to it, and to depart from evil is understanding. The idea of wisdom is, the fundamental idea is skill. It's a skill in navigating between two choices. And that's important. It's the skill that Adam had or needed in the garden to steer between the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, and he illicitly partook of the one, so he lost the other. It's the skill of Abraham to believe the promise that was given to Sarah, and not to veer to one side or the other, not to veer with Hagar, but to adhere to his covenant oath with Sarah, because when the promise was given to Abraham that he should have a son that would save the world, that promise was also given to Sarah because they were one flesh. So only Sarah could be the mother, and not another, not a surrogate. It's the wisdom that can veer between Leah, who is unlovely, and Rachel, who is lovely, and love the wife nonetheless, because both are mothers of promise. So it's always a discernment of going between something. We often, in our imagination, have depicted choices to be made that are critical, with an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other, whispering in our ear. And how will we navigate that? Wisdom is to navigate rightly, and to move ahead is not to veer to the left or the right, as God says to, as the commander of the host says to Joshua at the beginning of the book, not to veer to the left hand or to the right hand. And understanding is derived from the preposition in Hebrew bin, which is between. It's something between. And that is parallel to this idea of wisdom. And I think it's decisive for it. To understand is to depart from evil, presupposes you know what is good. And so you are eschewing, you're rejecting evil and choosing good. That is the way that you navigate to wisdom, but you have to understand between them. When the illustration of that is the extraordinary wisdom that was given to Solomon, the new king of David, the son, the new prince, royal, when he assumed the throne in Israel, was invited to ask some gift of God. That's seen it was given to David when Psalm 2 records that he was challenged, ask of me, God tells David, and I will give you the nations for an inheritance, the uttermost parts of the earth for your possession. And that choice is a promise. Well, the same thing happened with Solomon. God invited him to ask whatever it was that he would want. And he chose wisdom, the ability to judge the people of God. And the evidence of that, the next story after God gives him this extraordinary wisdom that surpasses all others, is that he is presented with this choice between two women. That's also an emblem of wisdom, to make a choice, like with Leah and Rachel, like with Sarah and Hagar. Solomon is presented with a choice between two women. Both are prostitutes, and so they're lawbreakers. Certainly God's holy law is being broken regularly. There are no witnesses. The question is to whom belongs the living child. There are no witnesses, and there are only the two mothers. Both are laying claim to the living child. And how do you judge that? And so the system of justice in Israel was not like our adversarial system, where you have the trier of fact, the judge or the jury, hearing two sides, defense and or a prosecution if it's criminal, or plaintiff and respondent if it's civil. You have lawyers presenting all of the evidence, and then the trier of fact, whether he's judge or jury, remains silent, is not allowed to speak. The inquisitional form of justice is what you find in Europe and what you find in the Bible, and that's where there is no jury. The king, who is the judge, develops the evidence. He creates the evidence. He does the investigation. And Solomon raises or expresses that intent, which he never intended to do. He pretends to be irritated by this frustrating choice, and so he alleges that he's going to divide the baby, which has a logic to it, but certainly would not be the right thing to do. And that provokes the true mother to say, no, give the child to the other one, and the wicked mother, a deceitful mother, to say, no, that's fair, let's do it. So she'll be like herself. She had smothered her own child in the nighttime. And so everybody then knows, and that's the nature of wisdom. Everybody recognizes what is truth in a situation where there is no other way of discovering that kind of truth. So that was the evidence that the chronicler who recorded that history after God promised him wisdom has given to us, to show that this is a wisdom that goes beyond the wisdom of man. We studied this actually in law school. I thought that was fascinating. So it still speaks today, the wisdom that God gave, and God gave him wisdom because God knows wisdom. So, anyway, that's wisdom, to get between two things and to be able to see them. I know in law, part of our training was to be able to anticipate the case from the other side, the opposing side, to understand their arguments. That would identify where your arguments are weak and you would need to bolster them, or how you would have to overcome the strengths and emphasize the weakness of the other side. Because in our particular kind of system, the adversarial system, justice becomes reduced to a joust often. Who has the better equipped, the better monetized, and the better lawyers often will prevail. So anyway, that is what it is. But the whole message of this particular chapter is one of learning to value what is truly valuable. And what's more valuable than gold and silver, he's not saying they don't have value, but he's marveling at the extent to which we seek them at the expense of seeking what is true. And what is true is what is revealed to us. And to man he said. So man would not know wisdom apart from the revelation of God, and I think that too is important. And by this we come to understand the value of Jesus, whom Peter says he redeemed us with a blood far more valuable than gold and silver, which perish. And that's a remarkable statement in and of itself, because gold and silver are two metals that are not subject to corruption. So he's saying, but Christ's blood is far more valuable than those. Iron will rust and return to dust. Bronze will corrode. And these are very aggressive dynamics of chemical decay. Silver will tarnish, but that's interacting with sulfur. It's a sulfur oxide. It doesn't go to the metal beneath the very surface. And that's only since the industrial age put so much sulfur into the atmosphere. But silver itself is incorruptible, and gold is incorruptible. And so that's part of the reason they're so uniquely adaptable to a monetary source. So they are the most valuable of the metals because they have continuance. But the most valuable thing in life, we're being told, is the wisdom that comes from God and from revelation.
Thank you for listening to the Dr. Warren Gage podcast. If you enjoyed this message, please be sure to like and subscribe to one of our channels so that you never miss an episode. We'd appreciate it if you could also leave us a review. You can find us on drwarrengage.com, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. To support the podcast and gain access to exclusive offers and content from Dr. Warren Gage, please visit our Patreon account at patreon.com/Dr. Warren Gage. We hope you join us next time on the Dr. Warren Gage podcast.